Shalom, this is Rabbi Lenny Sarko, and you're listening to White Canes Connect.
Hey there, PA Federationists. Welcome to another episode of White Canes Connect, presented by the National Federation of the Blind of Pennsylvania. My name is David Goldstein. Joining me today, as always, is White Canes Connect co-host and creator, Lisa Bryant. Lisa, how are you today?
I am doing well, David, and so glad we got a chance to connect again with Rabbi Sarko. He is delightful.
He really is. It's funny because I think back to when I was a kid and I would go to Hebrew school, and the rabbi was somebody that, not that I was afraid of him, but it wasn't a comfortable situation for me.
Mm-hmm.
And with Rabbi Lenny, it is just so different. I look forward to connecting with him in Orlando, which we talk about in the episode. It's just a lot different. And the things that he's done to create the Braille Torah is just amazing. His ambition to get it done, and the fact that nobody else in the world has done it is just amazing to me.
It is. And I think that we will be hearing about Rabbi and the Braille Torah for a while to come, because it is, like you said, never done before. Let's take a listen to Rabbi Sarko and what he did to create the very first Braille Sefer Torah.
Rabbi, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Rabbi Sarko, so nice to speak with you again. We met you at the state convention. Before we get into the work that you've been doing, tell us again how you even came to the attention of the NFB of affiliate.
Well, actually, I am visually impaired myself, although I still do lead a congregation outside of Pittsburgh. But my visual impairment came to me rather late in life, about 7 or 8 years ago, as a result of some bleeding in my eyes from type 2 diabetes, and it destroyed about 80% in one eye and 20 in the other. So I still do have some vision. So I had kind of a foot in both worlds, and that led me on a rather interesting pathway of trying to understand the role of the blind and visually impaired and how they operate within the Jewish world. As I began to reach out in my condition to say, who else is out there that I can commiserate with? NFB was a natural direction. NFB also has a national Jewish group. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to join them and participate, both help them from my rabbinic background, but also make some new associates who are in similar situations.
Mm-hmm.
In similar mode, I actually have been invited to the national convention down in Orlando this July.
Yes.
To bring the Braille scroll and do some talks and actually use it as part of a Shabbat service.
Yeah, well, we will definitely get to that. But before that, tell us how you came to translating, I'm not sure what the correct word was, but tell us the origin story of the Braille Torah. What is it? How did you decide that it needed to be done?
When I first became visually impaired, and the doctor said that I might go totally blind, that's a little scary, especially for a rabbi who loves to read so much. So the question became, okay, how do you read as a blind person? And that leads you to Braille. And as I began to learn English Braille from an institution, it came to my knowledge that Hebrew Braille existed. Unfortunately, at that time, nobody was teaching Hebrew Braille, so I had to kind of get books on my own and learn it on my own. And then you have to ask the next question. Okay, I know Hebrew Braille. There must be a Hebrew, what they call Sefer Torah out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sent out emails all over the country and said, who's got one? These are the scrolls that are used during a Jewish religious service, not just a book. It has some very specific specifications to them. Turns out there was none in America, so I started to look in Europe, again via sending emails out all over the place. I could not find any there. Well, there must be one in Israel for sure. No, couldn't find one. That led to sending out what we call a Talmudic question all over the world. Why not? And I got lots and lots of responses. But as I'm looking at these responses, it raised lots of questions, which eventually led to saying, well, I think this can actually be done. And it took about 6 years to answer the questions and to actually create the first one. I can create others a lot quicker. I can now get down to about 6 months or so to make one.
So the first one, well, at least, so when you say 6 years to make, but that included that whole journey of investigating,
That's
is
correct.
this right? Now, again, I don't want to assume that everyone knows what we're talking about. I know what you mean by Torah, but break that down to, what that actually includes. What's another reference of what the Torah is that people will recognize?
Okay, so Torah can have two meanings. The first meaning and the major meaning is all of Jewish learning. And all of Jewish learning is broken down into two major categories. Torah shebechtav, written Torah, Torah shebe'al peh, oral Torah. On the written side, we have the 5 books of Moses,
Okay.
Hebrew Chumash, but a lot of people also call that Torah.
Yes.
So whether you call it big T Torah for all of Jewish learning or little T Torah of just the 5 books. We also have prophets and writings. Writings would be Psalms, Proverbs, the small scrolls of Esther, Ruth, etc. Again, together, the Christian world calls that Old Testament. Jews would never use that word. We don't have a New Testament. We call it Tanakh, which is an acronym for Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. But when you look at Torah, there's also something called a Sefer Torah. A Sefer Torah is the Torah used during congregational religious services. Now, why would a Torah be used then? We have to go back in age a little bit. Pre-1455, which is Mr. Gutenberg. Yes, what was the books before that? On scrolls, but they were also very expensive. How do you learn to be Jewish? You need to read the scroll. That's where the mitzvot are. What Christians call commandments. Although, again, not a good translation, but that's where they're at. Okay, so we have to read them. Well, who can read them? Well, who received the Torah in Mount Sinai? Everybody. It wasn't just Moses. It wasn't just Aaron. It wasn't just the men. It was the women. It was everybody. So anybody theoretically can read from the Torah if they wish. Okay, so how do we get these Torahs? These Torahs are very expensive even back then. In today's money, a Sefer Torah can run anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000. So what happens? Well, a community gets together, like in Pittsburgh, and they all bring and throw some money into a kitty, and they'll buy a scroll for the community. Okay, so the scroll is in the community. If Lisa takes it home and to read it, can I? How am I going to read it if you've got it?
Yeah.
I can't. So we developed a custom. What's the custom? The community is all going to come together 1, 2, 3 times a week. It depends on your community. And we'll read the Torah out loud. That way, everyone gets the information. And across the years, across the centuries, across the millennia, customs developed as to how this scroll is to be made. And things like it must be all organic, right, from living things, so that the rollers that it's on are wood. The parchment is from animal skin, kosher animal skins. The inks that are used are from gall nuts and other items, which is kind of interesting. I'll give you a little trivia. If any of you go to, I know you might be blind or visually impaired, but if you happen to go to Washington, D.C., and look up the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, guess what it's written on, and guess what it's written with?
Parchment and
Yeah, parchment and the same inks that we use for Torah scrolls from Goldstein.
So that's how they're made, not considering the Braille version.
Right.
So tell us now.
It has to be handwritten. It can't be machine done, which was the biggest issue I had to face with. But it also must be all organic. So you can't just use a regular book and have somebody read from that as part of a service. It must come from one of these scrolls. And there's lots of rules that go around making these scrolls that were really edified about the 8th century CE. So one of the issues here is why does it have to be read? Well, memorization is an issue. Yes, for all of you adults out there in the world, you may have played the game telephone. What happens? You memorize a story and pass it on to one person who passes it on to the next, but it's all memorized. And then you have the last person in the line read or speak the story out loud. Is it ever like the first story?
No.
Well, we don't want those changes to be made in the Torah scroll. So it can't be memorized. It has to be read. Who can read from it? Theoretically, anybody, except what happens if you're blind? Can you read? No. So there's a thing called an aliyah, high honor, and that high honor is to read from the scroll. Whether you're a bar or bat mitzvah, whether you're just a member of the congregation, or any particular week, it's considered a very high honor to read. But could a blind person ever get that honor? Well, up until recently, no. So did they feel like they're full citizens of the community? No, we have the same issues a little bit with the prayer books. You have one prayer book. If you put that prayer book in that one book into Braille, hard Braille, you end up with 13 3-ring binders. Can you take that to the synagogue? No. So what happens with the blind and visually impaired at their congregations? They really don't feel part of it. That's an issue to me, especially as a rabbi. It's an issue. And so we have to remember Braille doesn't get invented, right, till Louis Braille in the, mid-1800s, yes? English Braille not till the early 1900s, and Hebrew Braille not till the 1940s. Well, that's about 3,000 years after the Torah was invented, yes? So, what did those people do before Braille? They couldn't really do much. But to me, it was a solution to allow full participation of the blind and visually impaired in their Jewish communities.
You had talked about the fact that you're not supposed to touch the Torah. And I think back to my bar mitzvah when I had a little bit better vision. I actually used I don't know if it was gold, I don't remember. It was some sort of pointer that I used to follow along. And I've got to be honest with you, I trained for so long. I did memorize it, but I memorized also the memory motion of following along. So if I did for some reason forget or get stuck, I could go back and I could read. So how is the touching of the Torah different because you've got the Braille Torah?
Okay, so all these things are what we call minhag, custom. It's not halakha, legal aspects. So why not touch the scroll? Well, I already told you, a scroll is made how? It's all organic. Even the inks are organic. If you would use your hands and touch the scroll, what's going to happen? You have oils on your hand, dirts on your hand.
Right.
Those letters are going to go away pretty quick. So what they do for those who reading, they use what's called a yad. A yad is the Hebrew word for hand. It's a pointer, looks like a finger of a hand.
And that's exactly what it looked like. Now that you say that, I do remember.
And you simply follow along. Now, again, you're not supposed to take the yad and touch the letters with them because you could scrape it off. You're supposed to take it and move kind of on top of it, above it, and help you keep your place as you move along. But again, that's a custom. Let's look. So it's not against the rules, so to speak, or the law to not touch it. We don't touch it so that we can preserve the scroll as best we can. Well, let's look at a Braille scroll. If I touch dots the way I'm supposed to touch them, am I going to destroy them?
Mm-mm.
What happens if my oils or dirt turns the parchment color? It's going to make it orange or discolor it in some way. Is that going to make a difference to the blind person?
Nope.
No. So the Braille scroll, you do touch. And as a matter of fact, it's kind of interesting because whenever I do seminars and bring the scroll, I do something that the blind just absolutely go nuts over. There's 72 different names for God in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
The big one, the number one is called the Tetragrammatron. Yud He Vav He in Hebrew. It's not supposed to be vowelized. You find it quite often throughout the 5 books.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever we do, you're always going to find it in any particular weekly portion. So what I do when we use it is I take a little sticky and put it by a little pointer by the Yud He Vav He. And I bring the blind people up and I say, okay, I want you to touch this particular word. And they do. I says, well, those with vision can't touch God. But guess what? You can.
Yeah.
And I did in Harrisburg. And Lisa, I think you did as well, yeah?
Yeah.
So it becomes something, again, very emotional and very meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
That this now actually is an advantage for them where they can touch God. Isn't that interesting?
And correct me, but I think I have heard that in the original transcribing of that name, if there were any mistake on that name, it would have to start all over.
Yeah, that's correct.
Correct?
That was the biggie. So let me go through a couple of the issues that I had to face when I started to go down this road. Right. So the first question that came over is, well, you can't make a Braille scroll because the parchment won't accept dots.
Mm.
Well, it seems like a reasonable assumption, but is it so? It's one of the Jewish characteristics we have. We like to ask questions. So I asked, well, is it so? And so I grabbed some parchment and put a couple dots on, and guess what? It takes it just fine. One of the next ones was, okay, you put it on these rollers and you're rolling it back and forth to get to the right portion. As you roll it, you're going to squish the dots out. Well, again, that makes somewhat sense, but again, is it so? And I got a whole, what they call a non-kosher scroll and put dots throughout it. And over months while I was answering other questions, I kept rolling and re-rolling and re-rolling. Turns out it doesn't affect the dots at all. Why? Well, parchment is pretty flexible, but pretty tough. So the dots are okay. Now, can you squish them out with your hand like bubble wrap? Yeah. Mm-hmm. But that's not the way you read Braille. Mm-hmm. Right? Braille is a light touch.
Right.
But can you destroy a written scroll? Sure. I already told you can take your pointer, your yod, and you can scrape the letters right off. So again, the idea is use a little care, custody, control, and the scroll will last a long time. But let me address your question that you asked. Mm-hmm. What happens if you make a mistake? You can't make a mistake when making a scroll. So I had 2 issues. First is, how do I do all these dots, right? When you do Braille, the cell size and dimensions of the dots and the dimensions of the cells are pretty exacting. Right, a dot itself is about 2 millimeters in diameter, 0.5 millimeter high. It's got really specific spacings. Again, why? Because it needs to fit under the pad of your finger to read it. Mm-hmm. Can I do that freehand? Not a chance. Also, you can't make mistakes. Well, how do I do that? There's in Braille, we know that how do you do it manually, right? I already told you the letters themselves have to be done manually to be a legal Sefer Torah scroll to be used in a congregation. Okay. Can you write Braille manually? What do we use? Slate and stylus, right? Now, I don't know about you, but when I use a slate and stylus, I make mistakes all the time. right? You get the 6 openings for the 6 dots, and maybe my hand will slip a little bit and I'll hit the wrong dot. Well, I got about 4,000 dots on a page and on a column in the Torah scroll. What are the odds of me getting through that and not making a mistake? Manually. None. Well, that's got to be changed. I got to figure that one out. And that's the one that took the longest. Here's the deal. The non-machine part of the Torah scroll only has to do with the making of the letters. So, for example, in a written scroll, they'll use a machine to stretch and prepare the parchment. And that's okay, as long as the letters themselves are done manually. So how do I take that and use it in the Braille scroll? Here's what I did. Instead of a slate that's the size of, 3 by 12 inches or something like that, I made it the size of an entire column, roughly 20 inches by 24 inches, give or take. Then what I did is when you get to a particular word, so let's look at, or a particular cell, particular letter. Let's look at Aleph in Hebrew. Is just like an A in English Braille. It only uses dot 1. What happens if I only put dot 1 as an opening in that cell? And I can't make a mistake. But that means that I have to literally have openings in my slate for the entire column and for each letter in that column. And I will need a separate slate for each column of the Torah, which is roughly 267. Now, how do you make the holes in the slate? Well, they have a thing called a CNC machine. CNC machine is a computerized drill. So instead of taking metal slates, I use plastics because it's organic. I then created each column. Now, again, what happens with a slate? Again, this is one of the difficulties. You're pressing down, yes? So our copying of the line is upside down and backwards. And in Hebrew. Must be in Hebrew. Right? Because every time you do a translation, that's an interpretation.
Right.
Scroll used in the synagogues must be in Hebrew, but I'm using Hebrew Braille, which is Hebrew. It's not its own language, like American Sign Language is its own language.
Right.
But Braille isn't. It's just a textual translation of the written language. So here we have actual Hebrew, but I had to take the Hebrew, I had to put it into the 40 character lines. I had to invert it. And then to save some money, I learned how to put it in the computer language for a CNC machine and gave it to a company who drilled all 267 slates. Yeah. How is my depth happening? It's just like a regular slate and stylus. So you have the bottom slate, which will pick up the depth of the item. And then you put your parchment in between, and then you put your top slate and secure them together. And so now what happens is when I'm making the dots, I can't make a mistake because the holes are there only for the letters that have to be there. Now I can miss one with my eyesight. That's where my lovely wife comes into handy. She comes in back of me and checks, and other people check and make sure I don't miss a hole. But as long as I leave the parchment on the bottom slate, I can always correct it before it comes off the slate. And so that allows me to make all the letters without making a mistake.
You mentioned still having some usable vision. What visual aids do you use, just on the day-to-day, and how did those aids or different aids help you to produce the Braille scrolls, the Braille Torah?
Depending on any particular day, my vision can be better or worse. So I have lots of different glasses of different magnifications and different magnifiers that I use. And when I use my computer, I can always use larger fonts. I basically try to go after anything that would help me. So I do a lot of audio programs and screen readers and anything I can find that will assist me. So I do limp along as I can with my eyesight. I obviously can't drive. That would be kind of interesting and fun.
Well, maybe not to anybody in your
Yeah,
path.
maybe for anybody else, but again, I can get by. I can see, big objects and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I always tell, people I have an interesting now arch nemesis. My arch nemesis is whenever you go to the public buildings. Yeah, like you're in an airport.
Mm-hmm.
I'm walking along, and you know how they have these little small, little tiny yellow maintenance signs, it's wet floors or whatever.
Oh,
I never see them. I kick them at least 20 yards when I hit them.
Oh, dear.
They are the
I'm
bane
not at
to
the point-
every visually impaired person, especially those ones that are like tents,
Yeah.
because they go over in a gust of wind.
Yep.
And, I noticed a lot of places now use one that have a larger base, because even with a cane, I know I've hit those plenty of times with a cane and they just flop over. And then you end up kicking them and whatnot. So yeah, I know those are brutal.
Yeah, I hate them. So it's called getting by. I use what I can while I have it.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying to you I'd never use my vision. I do.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to pick and choose what's happening and when it's happening and how it's happening and adjust. And I really try to use most anything I can. I've lately, the last year, tried to do a lot with refreshable Braille. And actually have created some prayer books in Hebrew for refreshable Braille that we offer for free to people.
Mm-hmm.
Again, because I think it's what a great tool, and the government will give you a unit for free. And I'm going to give you the prayer books for free. So there's no excuse for a Jewish person now not to be totally involved as much as they want or not want, within their synagogue environment.
Right. The fact that even with the amount of vision that you have, that you said, hey, I better learn Braille, is something that my mom told me my whole life. You should learn Braille. You should learn Braille. And I said, nah, I don't need it. Now I'm to the point where I wouldn't be able to learn it because of some other health issues. But the fact that you went out and did that is commendable, because it's just so important. As your sight starts to diminish, you still have that and you still be able to read. I've been called functionally illiterate by more than one person because I can't read anything on my own.
One of the things I learned going into this blind world and visually impaired world is everyone's kind of got a little different issues going on.
Oh, yeah.
Different approaches that they have.
Mm-hmm. We're very diverse.
Yeah. So I'm doing my best to offer, again, not to put a plug out there, but I don't make any money on this stuff. Back when I had sight in 2010, I think it was, I did a book called Modern Midrashim. A midrash is a Jewish fable. A fable teaches a lesson.
Like a parable?
Right, like a parable. So what I did is Jews divide their 5 books of Moses into 54 segments called parshiot. Each segment is read in a different week. And what I did is I took a concept out of each of those and created a modern short story, just 3 or 4 pages long, in a modern setting. I was asked recently by my synagogue to teach a class on Midrashim. And so they said I could go ahead and use my book as part of it. One of the things I've done is I really try to service blind and visually impaired across the country. So I do a lot of stuff online. So this class is also online. And so what I decided to do is take it and see how many different versions can I make of this book for the blind. So I put it into a Word form without pics for a screen reader. I put it into refreshable Braille grade 1. I put it into refreshable Braille grade 2. And I put it in audio wave formats so that anyone can call me. And I offer all these for free, again, by the way, can get these stories, how they want it, to best match their needs. So I'm finding that interesting because how many different calls I get. Well, I need it this way, I need it that way, I need it the other way. And we're trying to provide it in those methods.
Earlier, you were talking about that very first, I want to say, Torah that you built. And now you've perfected that to, I think you said 6 months?
Yeah, I've now done the second grouping in 6 months. And if I was push come to shove, if I had help, I could actually get it done in a month.
So how many have you produced now to date?
Two full groups.
Okay.
Again, why? And that should be discussed a little bit as well, because that is an interesting discussion depending on the Jewish group you end up with. Again, Jewish blind and visually impaired are spread out throughout the world, throughout the nation. Yes, they're not located in one area where they can all chip in and get a scroll.
Right.
If you have 1 or 2 people in your congregation, is that congregation going to spend $50,000 or $100,000 to get a scroll? No way. So what I decided to do is I formed a nonprofit company. I'm getting grants to do the scrolls. We're going to hold the scrolls here in Pittsburgh. And so if you in Albuquerque or Los Angeles or Orlando want to use the scroll, all you got to do is call me and I'll send it to you, and you just cover the cost of the transportation. But then in thinking about that, I said, well, what's the cost of transportation? If I'm going to send something UPS or Federal Express, it's by weight and how much value of insurance you have to get. All right. So I remember in my sighted days reading some stuff about the Middle Ages, and I saw some that actually created scrolls where they took each book and put it on their own scrolls and then put it into this quiver-looking item. So I said, for money's sake, what happens if I put each book on its own scroll and I only have to send you the one scroll? Because I'll know which, if you tell me how do I explain this? The version that's done, the weekly portion that's done isn't random. It's assigned per week. So for this coming Friday, the Torah portion that's read, whether you go to Sydney, Australia, Tokyo, Albuquerque, New York, Pittsburgh, I don't care where you are, Buenos Aires, we're all doing the same portion. Again, why? It binds us as a people worldwide.
Yeah.
So when you tell me I need to do the Torah portion for July 4th, 5th, whatever, I already know which Torah portion it is. So what I could do is, I can send you some materials in front to let you practice and learn the portion that you're going to read. And then the week before, I can ship it to you. You can use it that weekend and then ship it back. That allows you to use it, right? So if I'm shipping you only the one book that you need, right? Genesis, for example, yes, it's 1/5 the weight and 1/5 the insurance.
What is the weight of that? Just the one book?
Well, the weight of the scroll, one book of the scroll is about 10 pounds.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
But it gets shipped in a roto-molded plastic container, so you don't even have to worry about packaging. I've already done that for you, where all you do is set it down, lock it in place, and call the people and say, come pick it up. You don't have to repackage it or worry about anything. It's already done for you. Okay. But the container itself is probably 10 or 15 pounds to ship. So you're looking at 20, 25 pounds all told, but the scroll itself is 10. Now, for Orthodox, some, depending on their denomination, may have a problem with separating out the scrolls. I can send you one with all 5 on it. But you're going to have to spend the money for that shipping, for the differential. And that seems wasteful to me, since you're really not using any of the other parts of the scroll. And also what I'll do for you is, regardless of which scrolls you use, I'll roll the scroll to the spot you need. So when you open it, it's already there for you. I try to do everything I can, and I will assist you, right? Just like I'm talking to you, we can get together online via video conference, and I can help train and do whatever you need to use those scrolls in whatever location you need. So my hope is that anybody that wants to use it can use it. I'm not making any impediments that should prevent that.
Rabbi, tell us about the impact this is having. Tell us some of those wonderful stories of people that you have either met in person, like at our state convention, and have been able to firsthand touch these scrolls using their Braille skills and be more engaged in their Jewish communities.
Yeah, I think, well, again, a few things. The first is, I think it was even the very first person that I showed this to was this person that was close to 90 years old in Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. I went to her house. She was been totally blind since birth. Mm-hmm. She actually got so emotional touching the scrolls, touching the Braille, that she broke down in tears. But these were happy tears, yes, not sad tears. Mm-hmm. To have this opportunity at her age, she never even dreamed would happen, and so became really important for her. I think on the other thing, one of the things that I found, it was actually a little bit disturbing. Again, remember I told you at the beginning, Jewish blind and visually impaired didn't feel very connected to their congregations. Mm-hmm. So many of them didn't join. One of the things that I'm finding through NFB and other areas is they don't know Hebrew. Mm-hmm. They certainly don't know Hebrew Braille. Mm-hmm. Well, now what do you do? Because you got to be able to read Hebrew Braille to be able to use the Torah scroll. Again, remember I told you when I went to go learn Hebrew Braille, there was nobody to teach it. Well, what's a rabbi?
Teacher,
right? A religious teacher, to be exact. Mm-hmm. A regular teacher is morah or morah. Rabbi is a religious teacher. And so I sat down and created a home course to teach Hebrew Braille, again, that's free, that I will send to anybody that requests to be able to learn Hebrew Braille. Now, the only caveat to that is you do need to know at least grade 1 English Braille to learn the Hebrew Braille, because I use that as the base to teach it. But I provide lots of aids for people that are local and with audio as well, so that you don't need to be calling me every other minute to ask something. That there is assistance there in graphic format for people that don't know Hebrew and don't know Braille, that can assist, that is local to you, or a spouse or anybody else that is living with you that can assist. And I have been sending out a lot of those worldwide, actually.
I'm curious, how long did it take you to develop the curriculum?
About 6-7 months. Mm-hmm. That is done in Braille books that is shipped to you. Mm-hmm. There is actually 8 books all told, 4 in English and Hebrew Braille, 4 in English, Hebrew, and graphics for the helper, and a audio flash drive, which will, because I know some people don't know how to do chet, like l'chaim, right? Some non-Jewish people, they see that chet, and they have a real problem with it.
Yeah.
So I give them
like, how do you spell that?
Yeah. So I give them a flash drive so they have something to at least reference to. And I have sent out a lot of those. So I'm hoping to promote a lot more learning of Hebrew Braille, and hopefully participation in their synagogues. And
how does that get funded for you to send all this stuff out? Is this also
all
through
the grants? All through grants.
Okay.
Again, I'm trying not to, again, the first years that I did this, and the first time I started with the Hebrew Braille scroll, that had to come out of my own pocket. But once I did the first book and I proved that it could be done, and I had a nonprofit company, a 501c3, there are organizations, philanthropies out there that are willing to help fund, and they're also willing to help fund making these books and shipping them out, as well as these refreshable Braille devices and files.
You mentioned that you'll be at our national convention. Have you also been visiting, because I'm thinking of the Jewish Museum here, have places like that invited you to demonstrate this, or is that word still getting out?
word is still getting out. I've been doing some of these webcasts. I've been trying to visit as many synagogues as I can. So like when I'm down in Orlando for the convention, I'm going to take a few extra days and go visit different synagogues in the area.
Oh,
In the
wonderful.
school.
Yeah.
Again, this isn't a major organization, folks. This is me.
Yeah.
And so, and I am a full-time congregational rabbi. So I have a job.
Yeah. You had a day job.
And that takes up a lot of time. So,
Yeah.
I get to it when I can, although there are people that have stepped up to help. I do the best I can as fast as I can.
Mm-hmm.
One of my concerns, although it hasn't come to fruition yet, is, again, who can use the Torah scroll?
Mm-hmm.
Only Jewish Americans? Is this good for only Jewish Americans? No, it's good for any Jew in the world, yes? If you had a Jewish person that wanted to read, a blind person that wanted to read, have an aliyah, read from the scroll with their congregation in Paris, could I send them one of these scrolls?
Absolutely.
Sure. In Israel? Sure.
Mm-hmm.
In Buenos Aires? Sure. So how many scrolls do I need? Actually,
a lot more.
That's a good question. How many Jewish blind and visually impaired are there in the United States?
What are you finding? I'm not sure what we should believe when we hear about these polls of how many people are still living out their faith, because you hear it either in both the Jewish and Christian communities that people aren't going to church anymore. People are not being raised. They're recognizing their Jewish culture, but not necessarily their religion. So how does any of that, or has any of that, have you seen any of that play out in the demand for this? Are you seeing that this is maybe just older people now? Are the young folks interested? Because is it true that the young people, whether Jewish or Christian, are walking from their faith? Like, how have you seen any of this affect what you're doing?
Yes, but in both positive and negative ways. So again, let's look at the statistics. And these statistics are not, skewed by Jewish groups. These are out of the federal government. How many people that claim to be Jewish? That doesn't mean they belong to a synagogue. Just claim to be Jewish.
Right.
Are blind and visually impaired in the United States. About 400,000. Okay. If again, let's just take numbers. If all 400, if 1% of the 400,000 wanted to use the scrolls, that would be 4,000. Okay. How many people can use one scroll in 1 year? Well, I just said to you, we could turn around these borrowing things in about 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So that means one scroll could be used roughly, let's say 25 times on a good year, right? 4,000 divided by 25, I need a lot of scrolls.
Mm-hmm.
I can't make them that fast, not
Mm-hmm.
yet. And that's just the United States. I get people calling me from Canada all the time. But one of the other things to answer your question is, one of the big issues for the blind and visually impaired is, how do I feel connected to my community?
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't before. And I'm giving a pathway now, no excuse. You have a way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to help you do it if you want to do it. The other thing I'm finding, Lisa, that's really an interesting item, just general membership overall in our synagogue.
Mm-hmm.
Over the last few years, we're getting a lot of young people joining. Young people that are just starting families, or just young people. Why?
Mm-hmm.
They're searching.
Mm-hmm.
They're not happy out there.
Right.
They're looking for community. Again, families in today's are spread out all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
When I was growing up, 90% of my family was within 10 miles. Now I'd be lucky if I had anybody within 10 miles.
Mm-hmm.
So who's my family? Who am I going to celebrate Pesach with, Passover?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be my community family.
Yeah.
And so when these people now enter these communities, and they're entering wherever they're at, a lot of these younger folks are starting to go back to synagogues, mainly for community reasons, not necessarily religious reasons.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Any way we can make the connections to make your life better, that's what your religion is supposed to be all about. Yes, we're not here to hurt you,
Right.
to put you in harm's way. We're here to help you.
Right.
So if your synagogue can act as your community connection, great.
Mm-hmm.
So we're seeing an increase in membership.
Mm-hmm.
But for the blind and visually impaired, I'm trying to get people to join in order, because now they can participate. And, again, we do a lot of stuff here outside of Pittsburgh online. So when we do our Friday night services, we not only do them live, but they're also video conferenced. And so I get people from all over the country that are blind and visually impaired that join because they know I kind of make sure I describe stuff ways that they can understand. And they can not only join and listen, but they can actually participate because it's video conferenced. And they do. That lets them feel like they're part of something, and that's a good thing. And so I think this will continue to gain traction and gain people that want to continue to use it more and more. But it's always been a very good experience for people. I've never walked away disappointed in people using the scrolls.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's just a fascinating endeavor. And I love how this all started with recognizing that there was a void and your search to figure out, like, okay, how can we fix this? And so this has only started, I think you said maybe 6 years ago, right?
Yeah. And again, really not usable, but a year ago, 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. So we are only seeing the beginning of how this is going to really take off. Yeah.
Again, interesting, because I've been asked to come to a number of churches to let them see the scroll and explain the scroll. And I've also gone to a lot of secular schools. Again, why secular schools? Well, again, what was my approach? Again, I have not been a rabbi my whole life. I started out as an environmental scientist. I was that for most of my years until I went into the rabbinate. So how do you approach a really complex problem? Well, what do? You break it down to smaller problems, deal with each of the problems, smaller problems, and then you may get to the point where you've solved enough of those that you can solve the big problem. And that's kind of what happened here. So it's a method that can be applied outside of Judaism, outside of the scrolls, just in general life. I got something really tough, really complicated. How am I going to solve it? Well, here's a method for you. Break it down. Solve the small ones, and eventually that will lead you to solving the big one.
Tell us, for folks who will be in Orlando, when they can find. Do you know specifically the date that you're?
Well, I know the days. I don't know the times yet. They haven't come out with them. I know that on Thursday the 4th is when the National Jewish Group will get together.
Okay.
But I don't have a time yet, and they're giving me close to an hour, I think, to explain the story and give people a chance to experience it. Friday night, I don't know what time. I'm guessing around 5 p.m. We will do a service on that Friday the 5th for a Shabbat service, and part of that Shabbat service, we will use the scroll as it was intended.
I have a couple of questions. The first one is logistics. You're going to Orlando. I'm assuming you're just going to take the one scroll, not the whole thing.
Correct.
Or are you going to take the whole thing?
No, I'm just going to take the one.
Okay. And I'm also assuming you're going to fly.
Yes.
Carry on?
No, I'm going to ship it down to an associate of mine in the Orlando area.
Gotcha.
2 weeks before, just like I would ship it to anybody else.
Okay. Yeah, that makes much more sense. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think I would want to trust the plane.
Right.
Or the baggage carriers.
Right.
And that's not a carry-on. You know?
The other question is, you'd mentioned all these materials that folks can get, the stories that you created, whether they be in Braille or waveform. How do people get those? The
website, if you just want to go to the website of the nonprofit, that's www.devarim.org, DEVARIM.org. you're welcome to, my email address will be there, but if you want to email me without looking it up from there, you can reach me at Rabbi, R-A-B-B-I, at Rabbi Sarko, RABBISARKO.org. You're also welcome to just call me, 724-963-0789. Any which way that you need, contact me and we'll make it happen.
On the site with the, at least the audio files, are they on the site where people can download them, or do you have to send those as well?
No, because I'm finding people trying to download, unless you're cited, that becomes a problem.
Okay.
So I can do it one of two ways. If they want to try to get it by, right, it's too large of a file, I can do it by Google Drive or something like that.
Okay.
I'm finding, again, most people that are asking for that are blind have trouble with that. And so I can either put it onto an SD card or a flash drive and mail it to you. That's what I'm finding. Most people that want it as WAV files preferred in that method because they're used to handling it in that method.
Rabbi, this has been a wonderful conversation with you. Thank you for coming on. I hope to see you in Orlando, and all the best with continued production of the Braille Torah, or the Sefer Torah. Is that the?
Yeah, Sefer Torah is the one that's used for the service. Yeah, sure.
So this is great, and thank you for making yourself so available in so many different ways, and being so accommodating.
Well, you'll have to give my wife credit for that, I guess. So let me teach you one other Jewish thing real quick, right?
Yes.
Hebrew words often have multiple meanings, but unlike English, where if it's multiple meanings, it's going to be different meanings based on the context.
Right.
A lot of times Hebrew has the same meanings going on at the same time. So let me give you an example. How do you say hello in Spanish?
Hola.
Hola, French.
Bonjour.
Bonjour, German. Guten Tag, yes.
Okay.
Japanese. Konnichiwa, yes.
Mm-hmm.
English, hello. All those just mean hello.
Mm-hmm.
In Hebrew, the word is shalom.
Yes.
Shalom could mean hello, could be goodbye, it could mean peace.
Peace, yeah.
Not like a piece of pie, but like peace on earth, yes?
Right, right.
And
like
so
all is well.
So when I'm wishing you shalom,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not only wishing you hello or goodbye, I'm also wishing you a prayer for peace.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, when you go to Israel or any of the Arabic countries, the greeting is shalom aleichem, peace be with you.
Mm-hmm.
And the response?
And also with you.
Yeah,
I just know it. Is that right?
Yeah.
I see. And I thought that was a Catholic response.
No, in Hebrew, it's aleichem shalom. It's the opposite. Mm-hmm. Why? Because when I'm wishing you a prayer for peace, it's going to bounce off of you and also hit me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's really quite beautiful, that when I'm wishing you shalom, I'm not only wishing you a greeting, hello, goodbye, but I'm also wishing you peace. And I think that's a beautiful thought. Mm-hmm. So I want to wish Lisa and David a heartfelt shalom.
Thanks again to the rabbi for stopping by and telling us how he went about creating the Sefer Torah for so many folks to get use out of. It is just incredible, Lisa. The need for it, number one, and now how he's got to go, and I'm sure there's going to be much more need as word gets out about it.
Yes, there will be much more need. And he's absolutely right about this not being so specific to an older generation. Because if you recall, David, when we used to meet in person, there were folks celebrating their Sabbath on that same floor, and they were mostly young people. I would say maybe 30s, maybe
young
40s,
families. Yeah,
young
they were
families.
Definitely young families with those children running around like lunatics.
Yes, but they were celebrating a very traditional Sabbath. So he's absolutely right.
Yes.
So let's see how this grows. I think it will grow in demand. He's providing a wonderful service. He
really is. And I have to tell you, I am very interested, and I'm going to contact him in the next day or two to try and get those stories that he has written in audio form so I'm going to be traveling next week. Something I might want to listen to in a more modern setting. I always find it interesting when stories from way back in the day, and these are obviously way, way, way back in the day, you put a modern spin on it. So I'm really interested in that. So I'm definitely going to reach out to him. And again, we've given all his contact info. So reach out to him if you're interested in the stories, if you're interested in learning Braille Hebrew. And my eyes are glazing over because Hebrew was hard enough to learn. I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine Braille Hebrew. But reach out to him and let him know that you're interested.
And speaking of reaching out, you can also reach out to us with comments, with suggestions. You can email us at whitecanesconnect@gmail.com.
Or you could give us a call, 267-338-4495. You've got up to 3 minutes. Leave your name and town. If you do leave a message, questions, comments, show ideas, something you know, something you don't know, or have a question about, something that you do maybe at Passover that you would like to let everyone know. Again, 267-338-4495. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you for listening, everyone.
Thanks for listening. Happy Passover and take care.